Good morning or good afternoon.
Yeah.
Nate?
Welcome to today. We're going to be talking about CapEx.
CapEx, startup costs. Entrepreneurship is kind of the hot new thing, right?
Yeah.
Starting businesses,
Got to know your numbers.
got to know your numbers. So, yes, hello and welcome to you. Welcome to the live chat. Let's talk indoor farming. We're starting off with 5 minutes, an introduction kind of to Bright Agrotech. I'll give a personal introduction. We like to give a few minutes for people to come in if they're running a little bit late. But I have another bonus question today.
Oh boy.
Okay, and this will get us started off. How much liquid cash do you need to start a Dunkin Donuts franchise?
That's a great question.
How much do you need? What's your guess?
I have no idea. $500,000?
It's a good guess.
$250,000?
a
Are we
good
talking
guess.
financed or just
So
cash?
now they want liquid cash
Okay.
to consider you as a franchisee.
$250,000.
Okay.
Let's say $250,000.
All right. Send in your responses. How much does it cost to start a Dunkin Donuts franchise, liquid cash reserves? And this is a good question. We'll stick around for a while. We'll share the answer. But today we're talking about startup costs and indoor farming. And it's kind of a new industry, so these are exciting numbers. We're literally seeing a new industry pop up,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and there's a lot of nuance to the numbers that we're going to be talking about today. There's a lot of nuance to them, from place to place, and the kind of the intensities that you're looking at growing with. I mean, we can cram them in, and of course, your cost per square foot go way up, or you spread it out, and your cost per square foot go way down. So it's really
Right.
that's one thing that we really want to make sure that we're making super clear to everyone out there
Right.
is that. You absolutely need to sit down and crunch the numbers for every single one. So we'll share some general stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. We'll share general numbers. We do a little disclaimer, you can't, base your business planning on these numbers because every project is very different.
that's right.
Right, Nate?
That's right. But, like Elsif and Sean and the folks here, they run business plans every single day. Every single day. So we're not saying that you can't, essentially find those numbers. We're just saying that the numbers we're presenting today are general
Yes.
purpose numbers.
Yes. Safe harbor statement if you're an investor. But Nate, for the audience that's just tuning in and may not be familiar with Bright Agrotech, can you give us an idea of kind of the range of projects that you've worked on in the past? Maybe some of the projects that you're currently working on?
Yeah, you bet. So we work on all sorts of different projects, from greenhouse to warehouse to outdoor growing projects.
Small to large.
Small to large, anywhere from, we have projects in planning phases now that are tens of thousands of square feet down to, 500 square feet.
Yeah.
So these really, really vary in size depending on who's running them, what kind of the
Right.
goals of the operation are.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they tend to vary
Yeah.
quite a lot in
And
scale.
you're good friends with J.D. Sawyer, right?
That's right. Yeah.
The grow house down outside of Denver.
Yeah, you bet. So that's Colorado aquaponics down there. As a lot of you guys know, we really got started in the aquaponics space. We still do a lot of aquaponics work, even though now it's fairly evenly split between aquaponics and hydroponics.
Yeah.
And,
How big is his facility?
I'm not sure. I mean, I know it's got to be. He's got to have probably 10,000, at least 10,000 square feet down there.
And he puts
Yeah.
out quite a bit of produce.
Yeah, I haven't checked in on them lately, but I know that they're still running. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Local food, local communities. Denver is a somewhat northern climate, and they're bringing local food to the community. So I thought I'd give a mention.
yeah, well, Denver is interesting because it's a relatively northern community, but it's a fairly accessible one, frankly. Like air freight, the traditional means, trucking, the traditional means for moving fresh produce around, Denver is still fairly accessible compared to, say, Minneapolis or New York City
Yeah.
or, Quebec or Alaska or something like that, right? So, yeah. So I mean, even though Denver is fairly northern, it's still very accessible. So that always makes it a really interesting case study, because in theory, your produce pricing shouldn't be as great in Denver as it could be in, say, Minneapolis.
Right. So a little background for the conversation. If this is your first time, indoor farming may not be appropriate in every location or in every situation.
That's right.
It's a relatively recent technology that's driven by some of the falling price in LED lighting and so on.
Cost of natural gas, there's a lot of different things driving that.
And so we got into a little bit of that in our earlier sessions. When is an indoor farming facility appropriate? But today we're going to be talking about costs. So if you want to go back, we have a couple conversations on our archives. When is indoor farming appropriate? And that's a conversation we may pick up again in the future.
Yeah, it's always worth revisiting, because folks like these really simple answers where you're just like, yes, it works everywhere, do it everywhere, or field farming works everywhere, do it everywhere. That's just not true.
Yeah.
And so every single scenario, again, one of the reasons CapEx varies from place to place, environmental, all of these different kind of unique aspects of each individual farm demands different types of CapEx or different investments, right, on the front end.
Yeah.
And so whether it's in insulation or the building or retrofitting for this, that, and the other thing.
Cost of real estate.
All of these things are so highly variable that you really you can't get lazy. You have to punch the numbers in every single time.
Yep. Good. So we're about to get started here. We're about 5 minutes in. And a word about myself. My name is Jason. I'm a team member here at Bright Agrotech. My background was in entrepreneurship. I studied business at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. I was an early member of the Urban Farming Guys and also worked in economic development with really fantastic nonprofit there in Kansas City. They're called AltCap. Shout out to AltCap. So I'm bringing some of the finance, entrepreneurship, trying to ask the right questions here, and trying to bring the business perspective for our guests.
You bet.
Okay, so we'll have a chat. We're going to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit to show some of the numbers for the system that you put together. You have a really sharp consulting team that also provides consulting for these kinds of facilities.
Yep, that's right.
So if you guys have questions about any of this, shoot us a question in the chat bar. Or give us a call. We're always here. So Nate, I think we're going to jump right in.
Great.
We're talking about capital expenses and how to get a bottom line number to start up a facility. So what are some of the items that we need to consider when we're starting to prepare a budget?
Yeah, so so your primary capital expenses on the front end are going to be property, land, building, something like that. That, of course, can be reduced by renting or leasing. And we've been really focused on developing equipment that functions well in a lease type arrangement versus you own the building, feel free to destroy it, renovate it, whatever kind of situation. The cost of the equipment is very high. It's not like traditional farming where you buy the land. You're farming on the land, and of course the land itself is very expensive. It's a little bit more capital intensive in different ways. You're spending a lot more money on equipment than, say, land, right? However, the equipment is pricey. Processing equipment, your transportation. So one of those things is people aren't thinking about how do we deliver this product to market. Office equipment, just your general kind of business stuff, your lease or your rent payments, of course, and
we've got a line item here, cash reserves, right? So we're getting a little bit into strategy, how to protect your startup through those seasonal fluctuations.
Yeah.
So we do have an item here. If you're considering an indoor farm, you do want to budget for those first 6-9 months.
Yep.
And as you know, uh, 8 out of 10 businesses fail, right? Or whatever the current statistic is. A large number of these business failures are due to cash flow, right?
Right.
Just having trouble breaking even and then getting into the growth and profitability stage of the business, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's that's one thing that we touch on a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Is there's a learning curve to this. So if you're not an experienced grower, if you haven't had a whole lot of time doing this type of thing, even if you are, just working the wrinkles out of the system and standardizing all of your cycles, your planting and transplanting and harvesting cycles, and making sure that everything just works optimally, it takes time to optimize. Right. You'll come out of the gate at 60, 70% capacity and have to work your way up. So,
well, one of the single best things that you can do is to have an experienced grower on your staff.
Yeah, someone with some experience, really well-designed systems, typically eliminate the need for, like the traditional master grower, right? Mm-hmm. That's always been our goal here at Bright Agritech is to leverage technology, leverage good engineering and design to eliminate the need for a master grower.
Okay.
But even then, there's no system in the world that can replace someone that can recognize wilting, say, versus someone who can't. Right. So there's just certain human aspects to any type of growing operation. You do need to be there. You do need to be on the ground. You do need to know what you're doing.
Right. Good. So that's a quick overview. We are going to touch a little bit on financing today.
Great.
And we have some resources available, so please stick around. So let's get right into it. This is the Zip Farm vertical growing system. And just wanted to give you a chance to talk about ZipGrow particularly.
Sure.
Why did we choose vertical plane production when we were growing indoors?
So we are, there's a YouTube video out there on this, horizontal versus vertical plane production. There are a lot of different reasons, some cultural reasons and some other reasons, but the primary one is just space use efficiency. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about volumetric growing, if you dig down and you just get down to the basic math behind production, behind growing, and space use efficiency, you have to go vertical plane. There's just, it is very hard to make a case for anything but vertical plane growing. Right. And ours, of course, isn't the only vertical plane growing system out there, but it is a system that we designed specifically for vertical plane production as we began to understand the benefits of growing on vertical plane.
So quick disclaimer, we're not talking about giant skyscrapers or something. We're just talking about simple vertical
volumetric farming.
Some people are doing stacked trays.
That's right.
Growing up on a rack type system.
That's totally the traditional embodiment, right? So traditionally we take what we're most comfortable with, and the human mind is very, very comfortable with this idea of this stratified horizontal. Right. And just stack it up. Buy pallet racks, they're cheap, put the stuff out on them and stack them up. And it works. I'm not saying it doesn't work. And for some crops, it's a great way to grow. But for most of the crops being cultivated indoors, the crops that have the lowest carbon cost to be cultivated indoor, the ones that we should be concentrating on, vertical plane is far superior in terms of the amount of produce we can do in an environment and plant health. Okay.
There you have it. We have a vertical plane growing system here. The one we're looking at today is a 1,800 square foot footprint. We can fit about 39 of our racks in the space, about 780 towers. That's putting about 20 towers on the rack. That's 10 on each side. We have the lights on either side of the rack, kind of facing the rack, so we can grow on both sides.
Right.
Okay. Just a quick word on some of the assumptions we're putting in here. If you put in baseline conservative assumption, we're getting about 4 pounds of produce per tower, and we're pricing that at about $7 a pound premium wholesale pricing. We're looking at an 1,800 square foot system that can produce about $22,000 in vegetables on each harvest. Okay, so kind of a look at the profitability, some of the production potential that we have.
You bet.
We do consult on production techniques and how to reach these harvests, but that's the system that we're looking at today. Nate, we're trying some visuals today, so I'm not quite sure if we're getting the visuals out there, but we wanted to share some of this visually so you can get a better idea of what we're talking about.
We're getting fancy today.
Yeah. So let's pull back the curtain, Nate. How much does this cost?
Okay, so breaking down cost of equipment, the racks, kind of the internal equipment, almost $45,000 for that. $60,000 for towers. The lighting is the bulk of the cost. This is common to almost every single build, especially because we focus on really high quality lighting. The lighting is the one component that you want to make sure you're getting right. And we also focus on much higher intensities. So
this is the biggest line item here.
It's by far the largest line item. That's usually that's $140,000
Yeah.
for this size of a system. Plumbing, $11,000. Our environmental control system, about $4,000. Ventilation, $2,300. Seed station, $900.
Yeah.
Total cost around $260,000.
Wow. There you have it.
So, boom.
People ask, right?
Yeah, and you'll notice that the lighting cost is over half of that.
Yeah.
So of the total cost, it is most common on our builds for lighting cost to be 40 to 60% of the total build cost.
Okay.
And so that is always a giant kind of sticker shock item for folks, right? They look at the lighting and they go, "Ooh, I don't know if I want to handle that."
This is on both CapEx and OpEx.
That's right.
Last time we talked about these lights are running 18 hours a day. That's basically having a full-time employee paying them about $12 an hour.
Right.
365 days a year, right?
Yeah. No, so it's not insignificant, but it's such an important part of the entire production equation that you should not be skimping, right?
Right.
And it's not just about buying the fanciest lights, the name brand lights. It's about buying the lights that give you the right amount of light output, right? So that you can push your crops faster than you could in the field. So that you can push your crops faster than you could under lower light levels and drive your production as fast as is possible. Good.
So we're going to keep moving. You know, there's other things you could talk about here, but that's the baseline number for an 1,800 square foot vertical plane zip farm. So that's not the only thing you need, right?
That's right. Yep.
You're going to need someplace to put this equipment.
Yep.
Right. So can you help us understand a little bit?
So your facility renovations and upgrades is such a huge part of these things as well. And it's one of the reasons why on very large builds we tend to begin working with the architects, the engineers, and the folks that are going to renovate or prep the facility for the install at the very beginning, right? So if we're talking a 10,000 to 50,000 square foot build, sometimes even smaller, we're talking with architects, engineers, the folks that are going to be essentially making this facility compatible with indoor growing because they're not always perfect on the front end.
So we're talking about a facility here. I've heard some people talk about office buildings. My initial thought was, isn't there going to be some humidity? Can you literally put this type of system in any kind of building?
Well, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, most types of buildings, yes. Again, there's a lot of analysis that goes into this, right? You can't just plop these things in a building and expect everything to run perfectly. You want to do the analysis and find out, is the cost of the lease appropriate? Is this the right place? Is this the right location?
Yeah.
All of these things play into it. And so, not to back away from answering that question, but to say that the answer is really, really complicated.
So, okay.
But yeah, I mean, the goal with like what we're working on the engineering thing is to make it so that we can get to the point where we can plop these things down almost anywhere with minimal additional environmental system. So
a couple examples. I think you've been working on a project in an old abandoned school building. Is that the Colorado Springs build?
Right.
So that was kind of an empty school building.
Yeah, so with a building like that, there's enough volume that you can kind of air exchange to other parts of the building and kind of equalize everything out. With other builds, you have to ventilate outside. With other builds, you have to do HVAC or chiller systems.
Right.
It's super variable.
Sure. Okay. So in general, we want to budget for some workbenches. You may want to upgrade your sink and your plumbing to be able to feed the system with water. We've budgeted $8,000 here to upgrade to a high voltage electrical box.
Yeah.
May need to bring that in from the street level grid, or there may be something existing
Yeah,
in the
and
facility.
there's really two parts to that. So the first part is if you don't have three-phase, upgrading to three-phase. Now, a lot of the industrial buildings that people are kind of repurposing for indoor growing already have three-phase, but they don't always have enough service, right? So they're not supplying enough amps to actually service a massive growing operation. And so you actually have to upgrade your service. Not just get three-phase, but get enough service in order to run the facility. So there's kind of two parts to that cost.
Good. Okay. I want to mention real quick, we do publish some of this information, and we'll share some of that in a spreadsheet. Normally that comes with a consulting, a phone call with our sales team, but we do want to make some of this information available to you with a slide deck or another way that we'll get the information to you. So if you do want follow-up for the information we're providing here, please go to brightagrotech.com/innovation, and we're kind of shedding some light on the numbers that we're providing here. Sorry for that interruption, Nate. We talked about upgrading electrical system, and I have an item here, HVAC. And right now it's blank.
Right.
Why don't we have a number for our HVAC system here?
So HVAC is one of kind of the indirect costs that people really fail to consider, and it's tied almost entirely to lighting. So historically, heat and light have been coupled together, and as you put more lighting in to push your cycles faster and faster, you have to also install more HVAC to deal with all of the heat that you just get because you're dumping more light onto your crop, right? So if you're going to really push the envelope as far as what you can produce in a given time period, you have to put in a lot more HVAC, and the HVAC is also a very significant cost.
Okay. So when you say significant, I'm getting butterflies. How significant, right?
It can be really significant. So for a facility this size, with kind of the lighting intensities that we like to go for, I mean, we're much more aggressive with light. And that's an entire philosophical discussion that we can have some other time. Not entirely philosophical. There's some hard numbers below it. But the reality here is that for HVAC, you're looking at about 20 tons of cooling for this type of a facility, if you are running the appropriate amount of lighting.
Okay.
For most American markets, right? So with the pricing that you can get at market, your produce is much more valuable than your electricity.
Right.
And so we tend to optimize for revenue as opposed to optimizing for electrical efficiency.
Right. It's coming up all the time. Yesterday, Engadget, the magazine Engadget, ran a piece on indoor growing, cost of carbon, some things about renewable energy. We don't have time to go into it here, but people are really interested.
Yeah.
You know, the cost of electricity, these technologies are becoming more affordable, and how can we make this economic curve work?
Right.
Right. So let's kind of keep moving here. I think this coming Thursday, we're going to be diving deep into the HVAC topic.
Yeah.
Right.
You bet.
So if you guys are curious how much cooling you need for your facility, right? Join us on Thursday. We're going to be talking about HVAC, really diving in because it can be such a significant cost for your facility.
That's right.
Right. So in case you guys are following, right now we have a $261,000 system that we've put together, 1,800 square feet. We've got $20,500 in upgrades to the facility. And now we're talking about post-harvest processing equipment.
Yeah.
Right. Not a big line item, but we need some equipment here.
Not
right?
huge, but like when you're running the budgets for these things, you have to think of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you put every single cost down that you can imagine.
Yeah.
You don't want to be blindsided by anything. So I mean, for our list here, this is just a super preliminary list, but we've got dollies and carts, about $800. Racks and storage. So this is moving things around, storing things. Racks and storage, $800. Scales, you'll want to be measuring things. Even if you're selling by the case, you still want to be measuring everything you're producing, really understanding what your output is in real terms, in terms that can allow you as a grower to continue to optimize, to improve, to produce more.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like bins, storage, that kind of stuff.
Good. Okay. $2,100. Don't let that catch you by surprise. We've talked a little bit about trucks in the past. Chris Michael here, our marketing guru, says, you guys probably have a vehicle. Just throw it in the trunk. Right? And he's got a point,
Yeah.
If you're an entrepreneur, you're probably going to try to bootstrap this operation, right? Keep the cost down, especially during the critical startup stage. And cut the fat, right?
Right.
However, if you're in a metropolitan area, you're dealing with long commutes, your harvest is on the truck for more than 4 hours. We've got a truck here on eBay with a refrigerated box for $15,000. Let's throw that into the budget.
You bet.
Okay.
If you're talking any kind of scale, and you're in a place where indoor growing makes the most sense, that's typically, really hot environments where, or very urban environments or very cold environments, you need something that's probably insulated that can keep everything alive if you're out for 6 hours in 120-degree heat.
It's a quality issue.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. So $15,000 for a truck. Moving on to office. Pretty basic. Again, if you have a home office here, you've probably already got a computer or a printer. We do recommend about $2,000 just to get a basic website up and running. Unless WordPress, that costs you literally $100 a year to put up your WordPress website, right?
Yeah, it's not a huge expense, and it's so easy to do these days. If you're going to be editing it all the time and updating it all the time, it's just worth doing it.
Right.
It's worth noting, too, that through the Upstart Farmers program, we also help farmers put together websites.
Okay.
That's definitely a service to look into as well.
Good. Well, and we're not talking about sales and marketing strategy yet. That'll come at another time, but it's critical to be doing pre-sales during the startup phase.
That's right.
Right. So a website can help you connect with a customer, help you negotiate a price, things like that.
Yeah, they're basically the modern storefront.
Yeah.
So
good. Okay, so we put $2,800 for office supplies, pretty minimal, and we're at a real tricky spot here. You've got the equipment, you've got a facility.
Yep.
We have not covered cost of leasing or renting facility. That will be specific to your situation. Obviously, owning a piece of property is better than leasing, in some cases, right? But right now we're talking about those critical 9 months during the launch of your farm, right?
Yep, that's right.
We want to have some cash in the bank, right? So
a lot of our farmers, despite the fact that we tell them to have a lot of extra cash, a lot of them end up getting going, and some of them have no problems at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
They hit the ground running. They're producing at 70% in the first month, and they're at 90 or 100% within 5 to 6 months, right?
Okay.
They get there quick.
Right.
Other growers, though, it's a much slower learning curve. If you have no experience, you're most likely going to do things raw. And so that's why we've taken 6 to 9 months of starting capital, which is pretty conservative, but it's worth having.
Yeah.
And basically taking your first 9 months of OpEx and making it part of your CapEx.
Right.
And basically just saying, have this cash, be prepared to spend it. And if you don't have to, amazing. Right. If you don't have to, amazing. But
well, and it gets tricky here, right? Because a lot of banks or lenders don't want to finance operational expenses.
That's right.
Right. So if you do put this chunk of money, look, this is a big number, okay? I've got 9 months worth of electricity here,
Yeah.
right? That's $67,500. I've got 1.5 full-time employees at $3,000 a month. Again, if you're the owner, you're going to be paying yourself, but you want to make sure you have the cash flow to keep yourself afloat,
Right.
right? I've got financing, loan payments here to pay off my financing for 9 months. I've got packaging for 5 to 8 harvests to make sure you can get that produce to your customer. If it's just cardboard boxes, I put $3,000 there. If you need clamshells, that number can be much higher.
Right.
We talked about OpEx, last time. Marketing budget, you want to keep your marketing afloat. We've got seed plugs. We've got gas for your truck. We've got insurance to cover liability in case of a foodborne illness.
Right.
Right. And right now we're quoting $157 a month for a $2 million liability insurance policy.
Yep.
Okay. So we've got, and finally, consulting. We put $6,000 in the budget to cover any troubleshooting or consulting that you might need
Right.
during the critical startup phase when you might have a problem with any number of things.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's an important line item there too, because if you
Mhm.
have the money, you're more likely to use it, and especially it's super critical on the front end when a
Mhm.
problem arises to just instead of rooting around and trying to figure it out, especially if it's a complicated one, just ask someone who knows
Mm-hmm.
and get them to help you. Maybe they
Yeah.
end up spending 10 hours working on this problem with you, but
Right.
it's worth having that.
Well, it's worth mentioning you've put together an entire library of resources available for $10 a month to help you deal with common issues.
Right.
Right. That's Upstart University. University.upstartfarmers.com.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. That's
And fantastic
Cheap.
resource. Cheap, great resource if you need help with your growing. So just to recap, we have $160,000 in startup cash flow for 9 months to help you get through that critical first year of growing. Try to reach 100% capacity.
right.
Right. Okay. You ready for the bottom line?
Yeah. Hit me with it.
Okay. Here it is, folks. $461,000, $902. Right.
Right.
Big number. That's including the equipment, the facility. Upgrades to the facility, the cost of financing, and 9 months of cash reserves.
Significant.
You ready to pull the trigger on that?
Yeah.
There's a reason they say I bought the farm, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, these are not. It's not an inexpensive business to get into
Right.
by any means. CapEx is significant.
So just for perspective, I asked a question to our audience. How much do you need to start a Dunkin Donuts franchise? Okay. And in comparison, Dunkin Donuts is initial investment starting at $217,000 all the way up to $1,600,000 to start a Dunkin Donuts. Now these are a proven business. People love their donuts and love their coffee, but we want to give people an idea like, how do you deal with this level of capital budget, right?
Right.
Well, for Dunkin Donuts, you could easily be looking at $500,000. So, answer to the question, how much liquid cash do you need to start a Dunkin Donuts? $125,000. Okay. Oh. Dang. So do we have a winner?
Man, there's a lot of people in the right
Yeah.
range there. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, we have
I think some folks were practicing their Google foo while we
right.
while we were talking.
So it's true. You're supposed to have $250,000 net worth before you go out and start a Dunkin Donuts, and recommended to have $125,000 liquid cash according to my numbers. I got these from Entrepreneur magazine. So in comparison, let's go through real quick, and we're going to get into financing. Okay?
Great.
And so, folks, thanks for sitting with us through that talk. There's a lot of numbers there, and we're kind of pulling back the curtains a little bit on the indoor farming, the
Right.
cost of starting a business, right?
Yeah. And the other thing to say there is, as far as what specific numbers look like for your operation, just get a hold of our consultants, get a hold of the sales team, have someone crunch the numbers with your specific variables.
Yeah.
Could be lower, could be higher. It just kind of depends on your specific situation. But
Right.
this is all really good information to kind of get your head in the right place, I think.
Good. And so we're kind of setting that baseline number there, $460,000. And we'd like to kind of get into some financing strategies that we've seen. And let's go through real quick. We're talking about financing strategies here. If we can get that slide up on the screen. Help us understand, what are the most common approaches to financing?
Yeah, so we talk with folks all the time that are coming to us with a lot of different financing strategies. And we end up talking with a lot of people on how they plan to finance their facility. It's a significant concern. It's not a small amount of money.
Yeah, it's your family's livelihood.
Right.
People are committing to a long-term business venture here.
That's right.
Right. In the state of Wyoming, get this. When you go to register an LLC in the state of Wyoming, the state-provided document says, committing to a business partnership can be more difficult to break apart than a marriage. So choose your business partner very carefully.
Yeah.
Right? Because these are significant ventures, many years down the road. You're going to be committed financially, emotionally, right?
That's right.
So this is important for people who are considering going into business.
It's an important thing to understand. You have to take it really, really seriously.
Yeah.
There is we have folks that are building these, and they're 100% self-funded. So they come to us with a fistful of cash, essentially. That's pretty rare. That's not super common. Usually people are employing a mix of strategies, or they're coming in with investors.
Right.
So that's kind of the second part of that is they're coming as partners, right? So that you have a partnership, an LLC, something there where there's multiple people.
Yeah. Pool your money together.
Pooling money. Yep. There's, of course, a traditional bank loan, and this is more common, but this is a really hard one to pull off.
Yeah.
Unless you have a relationship with the bank, unless you have collateral, unless you kind of have all of these traditional things that you need to work with a bank,
right?
It's tough. And this is still by the bank considered a high risk thing, because they don't fully understand the market for it. They don't understand what this is.
We've gone through this dozens of times, I think. The single best thing you can do to secure financing is to have an existing record of sales, right?
Right.
Even if it's relatively small scale, to show that you have a product and you have customers who are paying for your product. It's the single best thing you can do to help qualify for traditional bank financing.
Right. They're not, traditional bankers are not going to investigate this industry too deeply.
Right.
But if you come to them with a P&L and with some documents that say, hey, look, this is what I'm making, this is what I'm losing, this is what, and you explain the mechanics of the business to them. Yeah. If you're making money, it's much, much easier to secure a traditional loan.
Right. Well, how hard is it to understand lettuce?
Right. Well, it's the whole concept that is very strange to them.
Right? I agree. It's strange. So, Nate, we've got a line here that says venture capital. Are we seeing venture capital?
Yes. So venture capital is this is kind of an interesting one, because growing plants is not really...
It's lettuce.
It's farming.
It's lettuce, yeah.
It's farming, right? And But there are some folks out there that are scaling very quickly, that are growing very quickly, that are making amazing margins, and this is starting to attract the interest of venture capitalists. And so we are seeing a lot more investment from venture capitalists into the industry. So this is VC money that's kind of flowing in, and this is really interesting to me because I'm not sure I would have expected it 5 years ago.
So we quote from the white paper, Indoor Crop Production Feeding the Future, from New Bean Capital. And the paper states that venture capitalists are interested and are looking for 8 to 12% internal rate of return from these types of farming facilities. Okay. So next week, tune in. We're going to take a look at internal rate of return, a profitability case study for this kind of facility.
Yep.
Okay. Don't miss that. We're going to dig into some of the details here. But I want to touch on this final strategy here, equipment financing. Can you tell us a little bit more about financing your equipment?
So there are, traditionally in the ag realm, it's been agricultural leasing, right? So leasing options for folks. The problem with a lot of our growers is that agricultural leasing requires typically, in the same way that bankers for a traditional bank loan require some kind of track record. Oftentimes these leasing companies require at least a year of business, of revenue, and they're oftentimes kind of tailored more towards like commodity crops or field crops, and so it doesn't always fit. However,
so they're financing the heavy machinery.
Right, they're financing tractors, right?
Okay.
And you can talk with a lot of ag leasing folks, and they say, yeah, your equipment would qualify, right? They're willing to lease it, but they want to see some type of history, right? Some type of a history with growing. You can't be, hey, I want to start this thing up. That's not going to fly with them, right?
Yeah.
Now, what you can do is when the equipment is essentially kind of collateral, right? You have something of value that the leasing company knows, oh, we can come in and repossess this thing if they stop making payments or what have you.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, kind of, it changes a little bit.
Yeah.
And where the most activity right now in financing is happening is around like the lighting, right? So this is either basically leasing programs for replacing traditional lighting with LED or more efficient lighting, right? Or leasing the lights for brand new growers. There are some leasing options out there for this as well. So
we do work with one of these financing partners. We have a pre-qualification process that we can go through. So if someone out there is interested in equipment financing, you can ask us for more details.
You bet.
Okay, and so looks like the most common strategy for financing is some combination of all of these.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
So we've covered 100% self-funded finance, raising capital as an LLC with partners and friends, right? We talked about traditional bank loans, touched on venture capital, and then finally this equipment financing. It's 5 strategies there. Very few people will have their own cash sitting in the bank. But I want to mention the 50-50 rule. Can you tell us about the 50-50 rule?
Yeah, so it's just basically financial good sense, right? It's you don't want to go out of the gate and bite off more than you can chew. So the rule is usually try to find 50% cash, right? Yep. So and finance no more than 50% if possible.
Right. Well, so a lot of folks, Nate, are pretty nervous about loans, right? And I get that, right? We're in a debt-heavy society, right? Back in college, my financial management professor would say, take a loan if that helps you retain ownership of the company.
Right.
Right. The benefit to you taking a loan and retaining the ownership just helps you keep the ownership and the equity of the company. And it can be pretty affordable. We're seeing rates from 3 to 8%
Right.
In business lending.
And to be crystal clear for the folks to whom this is, fairly new terminology,
right.
We're talking about pretty much traditional bank loans at this point.
Yeah.
So it's you just basically don't want to borrow more than you have to.
Right. Try to borrow less than 50% of your total startup costs.
And it is really about the cost of capital too, right? So it's cheap money versus expensive money. Whether you're giving up equity, that can be expensive money down the road.
Right.
Taking a bank loan, on the other hand, at a relatively low interest rate, that's pretty cheap money.
Yeah.
So it's looking at the options and really clearly understanding where the most cost-effective capital is.
So yeah, we're about to wrap up. This is a pretty information-rich session here. So I know we've covered a lot of material. Just to recap here, we're on the cost of financing. We went ahead, for the purposes of this scenario, we financed $225,000 at 5.25% interest for a period of 5 years. That's 49% of the total startup costs and results in monthly payments of $4,300. Okay. So just to keep this in perspective, we're trying to balance revenue and expenses. We're going to get into it a little more deeply next week in the profitability and IRR analysis. But that's the intro to indoor farming, right? So we're going to move to audience questions, and I appreciate you guys sitting through all that. That is a lot of information. And Nate, one of the things that I love about Bright Agrotech is that we're just pulling the curtain back on some of this stuff, right? It's very rare, I think, to hear this information unless you're working one-on-one with a vendor somewhere, trying to get consulting and project, costs.
Right.
So we at Bright Agrotech are very committed to sharing information in this industry. We want to share good information and conservative information. Right. These are numbers that we can defend, and we stand behind them.
You
right.
Bet.
So with that, I think we can move to audience questions.
Great.
There you go. All right.
I guess just tacking on to the very end of that, if you guys have questions about these numbers, make sure you ask us.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of information out there, and in this industry, I'm a total cheapskate, right? So I'm always looking to try and figure out where I'm being overcharged for something, where I can cut costs. But ultimately, you pay for what you get when it comes to indoor farming. And there are certainly spots where you can save money, but there are other spots where you can't afford to save money.
Right.
It will impact your overall revenue and your margins.
Yeah. Well, Nate, it took us about 40 minutes to get through all that. So that was a lot of information. Again, I do want to make some of this information available in a slide share or another way to get this information out there. Let's go to a question here from David asking, are there any assumptions for the useful life of the equipment? I've heard some skepticism from financial backers over the high CapEx cost due to the rapid pace of innovation.
Sure. Yes. So it depends on the manufacturer, right?
Mm-hmm.
From manufacturer to manufacturer, it varies fairly wildly. The important thing to really think about there is, what are they willing to warranty the equipment for?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we end up having a conversation a lot with customers, with their backers. What are the warranties on the equipment? And what exactly is the value of that equipment in 2 years, in 3 years?
Right.
So, that ties into depreciation rate. It also ties into your ongoing kind of expenses as you have to replace equipment as it goes.
Right.
And that's one thing that we've really had to look at closely is trying to understand, how we maximize that value to the customer, right, over the long term.
Yeah.
And, it's absolutely fair to have some skepticism over the rate of growth and innovation in the industry. For a while,
don't buy it. No, in other words, don't buy it now because it's just going to get better in 5 years.
Right. That's the fear, right?
Right. Well, what are you going to do for 5 years if you're interested in starting a business?
Well, so there are a few ways that from the manufacturer side of things. So just taking myself out of this conversation and coming at it from a manufacturer.
Yeah.
And I think this is a lesson for all of the manufacturers in this space, is how do we design products that are just as relevant in 5 years as they are today?
Right.
So even if we know kind of where the key components are going to change, right? Mm-hmm. Technology is going to evolve. There's some places where the tech isn't going to evolve that fast. Mm-hmm. There are some places where it will. So how do we design equipment that allows us to change the things that are going to change at minimal cost to the grower over time, versus design something that just needs to be thrown out and replaced.
Right.
And that's really what we've been focusing on. We're going to talk about that on the 30th, I think, as we kind of talk about some of the products we've been working on.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us. But just to let folks know, we are planning on rolling out a new product on June 30th. Mark your calendars.
Yeah. So, I mean, to finish off that question, it is a totally legitimate concern, but the reality is that this market is. We can tell you, as people that are kind of at the epicenter of this thing, it is moving very, very fast.
Yeah.
And there is, of course, a certain amount of first mover advantage that is there.
Right.
And I'll be the first to admit I'm the guy that always says you don't have to be first, you just have to be best. Mm-hmm. But the reality is if there's good equipment going to market, if there are people that are figuring out the mechanics of these models before anyone else, they're going to have an advantage.
Right.
And so that's kind of the thing is looking at the real cost, sure, but the opportunity cost of waiting for 2 years for a marginal improvement in technology, in one area, maybe significant somewhere else.
Okay.
But you just have to think about that clearly.
So that's good, Nate. I know it's a nuanced discussion. It sounds like, if you wait for 2 years, you may lose the opportunity in your community.
Yeah, or maybe not. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
But I would encourage people to move faster rather than slower, given the rate the industry's growing.
Thank you, Nate. Moving on. Real quick, is the 3,200 pounds of harvest, is that for lettuce or another crop? Question from Logan. Thank you, Logan.
So that would be for something like lettuce, right, which is fairly a relatively low weight crop, right? So you can, of course, do better numbers than that.
We're going to get into some of these assumptions next week, because really what you need to know is there are two assumptions that underlie our financial projections. How much can you grow, and how much is it worth, right?
That's right.
So it's not a simple answer there. We will get into some of the crop discussion and profitability next week during the IRR and profitability analysis. Thank you. Yeah. And so we have a couple more questions we'll try to get to. These equipment numbers are lower than I'm currently projecting, but at $122 a square foot, they're also not the lowest I've seen. Are there any produce losses assumed in revenue estimates?
Yes. So in all of our estimates, we assume 5 to 10% losses. 5% is the industry standard. We assume 10%. We've never experienced 10%, but we still basically squeeze that into all of our assumptions.
Good.
Again, coming at it from the most conservative angle possible.
Good. Well, and I do want to reinforce, when we do a financial analysis for a client, we provide a conservative estimate.
That's right.
We'll also provide an aggressive estimate, but it's really up to the management and the ownership of the company to figure out where they fit, right?
That's right. We are not your CFO. Yeah. We're not your accountant.
Right.
We are giving you the best possible numbers from our kind of perspective, or our, portal viewpoint on the industry.
Right.
But they don't replace good sense.
Right. So, yeah, I think we can leave that. Question from Harry. Thank you, Harry. Are there cash crops that have a better return?
Yes.
Cannabis.
Yes, there are always cash crops that give you a better return. So the question there is, as kind of markets open up to entirely new crops that we haven't been able to cultivate before. The reality is that farmers have more choices today than ever before.
Right.
Not just from a crops and production standpoint, but from a market standpoint, right? We can sell more things than ever before. People are demanding more things than ever before.
Right.
And so the amazing thing is we have basil pictures of basil on the shelf coming out to $80 a pound in some places. In some places, we're talking about certain herbs. When you take this fraction of 1/4 of an ounce little package of herbs and extrapolate it out, you're talking $200+ a pound for some of these things, right?
Well, so, we priced some basil at Target last week, and it's about $53 a pound.
And that's totally standard
for the basil they're charging, at selling at Target.
Totally standard. So as we're talking about cash crops, it's going to vary from market to market, but never before in the history of the world has there been such an amazing market for specialty crops. So if you're a guy who can connect with your market in a meaningful way, you can sell smaller volumes of really high value stuff. I always tell folks that people always joke, with the Colorado markets close, are you guys getting into cannabis down there? And we're like, well, we don't have any compliance issues, and we can make almost as much money growing basil as we could cannabis. So the reality is that the markets are primed for all sorts of specialty crops, whether that's cannabis or basil or oregano or what have you. The reality is that the markets are incredible.
Right. We'll leave that right where it is, Nate. I appreciate that answer. Gosh, thank you guys. We have a lot of great questions coming in. We're going to cut this off in about 4 minutes.
Okay.
That gives us time for one more. What about, again, a question from Harry. Thanks, Harry. What about a smaller scale system for consumers or homes?
Sure. There are more and more small scale kind of farming, gardening systems out there. Now, what I predict is we've got this big hype right now about in-home everything. My guess is that that's kind of a fad at the moment, and eventually kind of that enthusiasm on the part of home users, consumers, will be replaced by kind of more of a relationship with the local growers. The idea is developing this local network of growers that can service home accounts, right? So that's kind of the idea behind the farm walls that we've built, spring systems, that kind of thing, is you take in a live tower, you drop it in, and people are just consuming it in their homes. When it's done, it's it's an extension of the CSA model, right? So ultimately, I think for home systems, consumers, it's going to more closely resemble extended CSA as opposed to brand new equipment that a refrigerator that you plop in your kitchen and it just pumps out lettuce.
Right. Okay. A lot of technology coming out these days.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I got a question from Christopher we'll talk about real quick. On the electrical service, how many amps with the 3-phase? I just want to mention, we got your question, Christopher. On some of the more technical questions for electricity and stuff like that, we do recommend contact our consulting team. They can help steer you in the right direction on some technical questions, electrical and energy analysis.
Right. Yeah, and it really it varies. So for this 1,800 square foot facility, I don't know. I'd have to do the math. To put it in perspective, high voltage, I'm not even sure what we're running on. They're 277 or something.
Yeah.
The LumaGrow lights that we're currently using out there on stacks draw about 0.7 amps per light. So you start adding those up, and they add up pretty quick. Actually, I think it might be a little bit less than that, 0.6.
Okay.
Every single lighting will have kind of the different ratings, right? You get your wattage, and everyone talks in terms of wattage. Wattage is just volts times amps, right? A multiple there.
Good.
And so divide it by the voltage, and that's the amperage you're going to be drawing on a light-by-light basis.
Okay. Man, I'm tired. That was a lot of information.
That was a lot of info.
You guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, my name is Jason. I'm a team member here at Bright Agrotech with Nate Story, CEO and founder. And please join us on Thursday for a discussion about HVAC.
Yep.
We're digging deeper.
It's going to be a good one.
It's going to be a good one because that's a big expense. And it's also one of the biggest hidden costs of running the indoor farm.
That's right. It's the thing that people don't think about. And in the era of LED lights where people just assume all of their heat problems are gone, it's something that's often overlooked.
Yeah. So I think we're going off the air here in a minute, and want to thank you again. Join us on Thursday.
Yep. Thanks so much. Great doing this.